So today, we're diving into the story of Mohamed Suhail from Sri Lanka. And let me tell you, it's a case that really makes you think. It forces us to look at those blurry lines between justice and state power. And maybe most importantly, what happens when political promises just, well, they slam right into a very harsh reality.
I mean, think about it for a second. Could a single emoji, just one click, cost you 9 months of your life? It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, right? A crazy headline. But this isn't just a hypothetical. It's a shocking question, and it's right at the heart of the story we're unpacking today. Because for a 21-year-old named Mohamed Suhail, this wasn't some abstract legal debate. No, this was his reality. A totally life-altering ordeal that honestly shines a massive spotlight on some really deep-seated problems in Sri Lanka's legal system.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the arrest itself, how a simple emoji led to it. Then we'll dig into the law that was used as a weapon here. After that, we'll get to the really surprising part, the accountability that followed. And all of that leads us to the big, final question. What does justice really look like at the end of the day?
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. How on earth did a social media post, an emoji, lead to something this severe? Let's look at the timeline.
So, here's how it went down. On October 25, 2024, Suhail gets arrested for a social media post protesting Israel. And then, for more than 9 months, he's just held in remand prison. We're talking no conviction, nothing, just held under this controversial law called the PTA. It's not until September of the next year that he's finally acquitted and released. And get this, it's because there wasn't even enough evidence to charge him in the first place.
So, that raises a huge question, right? How is something like that even possible? Well, to understand that, we need to talk about the law that was used as a weapon against him, the infamous PTA.
The Prevention of Terrorism Act, or PTA for short. This is a really controversial law in Sri Lanka. It's been criticized for a long time, both at home and around the world. Why? Because it gives the state these incredibly broad powers to just arrest people and detain them for ages, often on really vague grounds, without even filing clear charges.
And here's how the source material we're looking at describes it. It calls the PTA a pliant tool for any ruler to suppress any citizen who holds an opinion they do not like. Wow. So you see, it's framed not just as a law, but as this convenient weapon. The suggestion is that it's not always about fighting terrorism, but about silencing people and controlling what they're allowed to say.
And that brings us to the absolute core of the issue here. The article argues that Suhail's case wasn't about a real threat at all. It was all about interpretation. The authorities basically misused this powerful law to take something that was clearly freedom of expression, a social media post, and twist it to label it as an act of terrorism.
But the story doesn't end there. In fact, what happened next is where things get really interesting, and honestly, extremely unusual. It actually set a major precedent.
So after he was released, Suhail filed a fundamental rights case, and he won. He got a settlement of 2 million rupees, but you know what? It's not the money that's the big deal here. The real story is who ended up paying for it.
This right here, this is the moment that makes this case so significant. The police OIC, the officer in charge, literally stood up in open court and said, "I made a mistake. His arrest violated his fundamental rights." I mean, an apology like that from a state official, so direct and so personal, it's pretty much unheard of.
So let's break down why that's such a game changer. Normally, in cases like this, the state pays. And who is the state? It's the public, right? It's taxpayer money. But in this case, a totally new precedent was set. The police officer who was responsible for the arrest, he agreed to personally pay the compensation. This is huge for personal accountability.
So on one hand, this is a massive win for accountability. But on the other hand, it kind of forces us to ask a much deeper, more complicated question. Is this really justice? And what does that even mean?
Because look, 2 million rupees is a number. You can count it. But what about the price you can't put a number on? We're talking about 9 months of a young man's life, just gone. Think about the mental anguish for his family, the social stigma of being labeled a terrorist, the psychological toll of being locked up. Can money ever truly pay for that? I mean, it's pretty clear that some damages just can't be fixed.
And here's where the story zooms out from one person's tragedy to a major political paradox. The timing of all this is absolutely critical. Suhail's arrest happened just 1 month after a new government came into power, a government that had specifically promised to get rid of the PTA.
I mean, for years, the president's party had been campaigning against the PTA. They were some of its loudest critics.
That was the promise they made to people. But what's the reality now? Not only was the PTA used on their watch, but they're now proposing another restrictive law, the State Security from Terrorism Act. So the promise was to get rid of these tools, but the reality looks a lot like they're just building new ones.
And this quote from the article really just hits the nail on the head. Justice is not just the compensation or verdict received after a wrong has been done, it is completely blocking the possibility of a wrong happening through legal means. It's such a powerful idea, right? True justice isn't about fixing things after they're broken. It's about making sure they can't be broken in the first place.
So at the end of the day, Mohamed Suhail's case leaves us with this massive, lingering question. We have a law that's supposedly there to protect people, but it was used to steal a young man's freedom. And it makes you wonder, when a law that's meant to protect us becomes a tool for suppression, who is truly secure?